I'm sure you've seen it loads of times before. Tools or features in Excel that people claim will save huge amounts of time, but they rarely deliver. And if they did, why is everybody still spending so much time in Excel? The problem is that most people are focusing on individual features and not how features work together. So today I want to cut through the hype and show you how to build a process that will really save you time in 2026. We will spend a bit of time setting up the process, but the key is that once that process is working, we can update everything to a new week, month, quarter or year just by clicking one button. I've designed this for you to work along so that you can get the most benefit. To get the example file, follow the links in the descriptions box below. And once you've done that, if you're ready, let's get started. For this example, we are working with two inputs. Firstly, we have a general ledger file, which has been downloaded from an accounting system, and also a file which contains the annual budget by month. Now, in this example, we are working with Excel workbooks because it's easy to demonstrate and for you to work along. But they could also be database and other supported data connections. Here we have our general ledger. This is the format that you might expect to see if you work with accounting data. Our other format is our budget in a cross-tab layout. So we have account code, account and cost center on the left, and then we have each month along the top. What we want to do is to combine both of these inputs together so that we can create a simple actual versus budget report. So we're going to close both of these files and then connect to them using Power Query. Power Query is the tool that gets data from lots of different sources. Then it cleans and reshapes that data into the perfect layout for your needs. And finally, it loads that data into many different locations. But before we get into where to load the data, let's start at looking at how we can get and transform the data. We're going to start by connecting to our general ledger file. In Excel, I'll go to the data ribbon and get data from file and from Excel workbook. We then navigate to the location of where our file is saved. I'll select General Ledger and then click Import. This now brings up the Navigator window. In there, I will select the only sheet in our workbook, which is Sheet 1. We can then see a preview of that data, and I will click Transform Data. That now brings the data from our General Ledger file into Power Query, and we're now ready to start making transformations. Now, I'm not going to talk through each step in detail, but we will work through them one by one. Let's start in our Applied Steps window. We start with our source. That is the connection to the workbook. We then drill in to our sheet to get our data. Power Query then adds two additional steps that we don't want at this point. So let's delete both of those steps. If you notice, we have 4 rows at the top of our data that we want to remove. So from the Home ribbon, we can go to Remove Rows, Remove Top Rows, and we want to remove 4 rows. I'll then click OK. The first row of our data now contains the values that we wish to be our column names. So I'll come up to Use First Row as Headers from the Home ribbon. When I click that, we now have column headers. And you'll notice that Power Query has automatically applied the changed type step, which we don't want at this point. So we will delete that step. We now have 2 further items that we want to transform. First of all, our account column contains the account name and also the account code. And secondly, we have 2 value columns for debit and credit when we just want a single value column. Let's start with our account code. I will select that column, and then from the Home ribbon, we can go to Split Column, and we want to split by delimiter. The delimiter that we want to use is a space and an opening bracket. I'll then click OK. That now splits our column. We now have a column for the account name and a column with the account number with a closing bracket. You'll notice Power Query has automatically added the change type step, which again we don't need. Let's delete that. And now I'll select account.to. We'll go to transform and we're going to replace values. The value that we want to find is a closing bracket and we want to replace that with nothing. I'll then click OK. And we now have our two columns. Let's rename these columns. Account name and also account code. Let's now transform our debit and credit columns. For that, I'm going to go to Add Column and Custom Column. We're going to create a new column called Value. And that value is going to be based on our debit column, but if that column contains null, we want to return 0. And from that, we want to minus our credit column, which if that contains null, we also want to return 0. I'll then click OK. And we now have a value column that contains the net of those two other columns. We no longer need debit and credit, so I will select both of those and press delete. Our data is now in a clean and tidy state, but we are going to make just one more transformation so that we know that this data is from our trial balance. So I'll go to Add Column and Custom Column again. For the column name, we're going to call this Version. And in there, we want to return the word actual for each row. I'll then click OK. We now have everything we need. Let's apply our data types. I'll select the first column, hold Shift, select the last column, then go to Transform and Detect Data Type. Let's now review those data types. Account name is text, account code is number, cost center is text, date is a date, source, description and reference are all text. Then we have our value column, which is a decimal number, and our version, which is text. We are happy with all of those. Let's now give our query a name of GL, which stands for General Ledger. We can now close and load this data, but we're not ready to close and load it to the workbook yet. So I'll go to Home, click on the Close and Load drop-down, select Close and Load to, and we want to load this as Only Create Connection. I'll then click OK. Next, we want to get our budget data. So again, from the Data ribbon, we go to Get Data, From File, and From Excel Workbook. This time, we want our budget file. I'll select that and click Import. Our file has a single worksheet. I will select that, and once again, we can see a preview of that data. I'll now click Transform Data. This now brings the data from our budget workbook into Power Query, and we are ready to start making transformations. Let's just review the applied steps. We have our source step that connects to the workbook, and then we drill into that workbook. After that, we have the change type step, which we don't want at this point, so I will delete that. The first row of our data currently includes the column headers, so I will select Use First Row as Headers. Once again, Power Query has applied the change type step. We don't want that at this point. Next, we're going to select the account code column, hold Shift and select Cost Center. Then, from the Transform ribbon, we're going to go to the Unpivot Columns section, click on the small drop-down arrow and select Unpivot Other Columns. That means we now have columns for account code, account, cost center, an attribute column, which is our date. So let's rename that to date. And then we have a value column. Let's now add another column for our version. I'll go to Add Column, Custom Column. We're going to call this Version. And in there, we just want the word budget. I'll then click OK. Let's review our column names. We have account code. That's the same as our GL query. Then we have account. This is different to the name that we have in our other query. So let's rename this to account name. Then we have cost center, date, value, and version, which are all the same. Now, before we go any further, we do just need to think about our date column. In a previous step, our dates were the header row of our columns. We then unpivoted those columns. That means, depending on your region, Power Query might not accept this as a date value. So what we're going to do is click on the data type icon. We're going to come down to using locale. The data type will be date. And then for the locale, make sure that that is English United Kingdom, because that is where the file originated from. I'll then click OK. We can now apply data types to all of our columns. I will select those, and then from the transform ribbon, I'll select detect data type. Let's now review our columns. Account code is a number, account name is text, cost center is text, date is a date value, value has come across as a whole number, and that's because none of our numbers currently have decimal places, but they could in the future. So let's change that to a decimal number, and we want to replace that current step. Finally, we have version, and that contains budget in every row. We're now going to combine our GL and our budget queries together inside a new query. To do that, I'll go to Home, and then I'll click on the arrow next to Append Queries, and we want to append queries as new. For our first table, let's select our general ledger, and then for our second table, we want our budget. I'll then click OK. That now creates a new query that contains both of our previous queries stacked together. Let's call this query Fin Data for financial data. And we're now ready to close and load these two new queries of budget and Fin Data. I'll click on the drop down for close and load in the Home ribbon, and we want to close and load too. We're going to load these as connection only, and then I'll click OK. We now have our three queries available in our workbook, but we haven't given any of them a load destination. That's what we're going to do in the next section. Power Query can load data into several different locations. Two of the most flexible are tables and Power Pivot's data model. We're going to look at Power Pivot in the next section. So for now, let's take a look at tables and their auto-updating counterpart, dynamic array formulas. For this example, we had our general ledger query and our budget query, and we combined them together into our Fin Data query. Therefore, that is the only query that we need to load. I will select that, right-click, go to Load To, and we want to load this as a table. We want that in the existing worksheet, and we have cell B3 selected. I'll then click OK. That now loads the data that was in our general ledger and budget files that has been combined together, and now that loads both of those files together into this table. Now that we've got this table, we are ready to start using dynamic array calculations. For this example, we are going to use the group by function. Now this is one of Excel's newer functions, but also one of its most advanced functions. Just as in the previous section, where we went through the steps in Power Query, but didn't talk about those steps in detail, we're going to take the same approach with group by. And we're going to start in cell B4 by typing equals let opening bracket. Now let is a function which allows us to allocate other calculations to names, and then we can use those names later on within our calculation. I'm going to press Alt and Enter to create a new line. The first name that we want to create is month. This is going to get the month number from our date column. For this, we want to use the month function, and we want to get the month from our Fin Data table, and we want to get that from our date column. I'll then close the bracket on our month function. That means it'll take our date and convert it into a month number. Let's create another name called actual, and this is going to get the actual values from our table. Therefore, we're going to reference our Fin Data table. We want to pick up the value column, and we want to multiply that as a condition where, opening bracket, using our Fin Data table, and then our version. And if you remember, version contained either the words actual or budget. Because we want our actual data, we want this to be equal to actual. I'll then close that bracket at the end. Now, because we're working with general ledger data, that means we have debits and credits. So for our purposes, we want to add a minus at the start of our calculation so that it flips those debit and credit signs. We're then going to come to the end, I'll add a comma and then create another new line. Let's create another new name of budget. For budget, we want the same calculation as before. So I will copy that and paste it, but rather than referencing actual, we want to reference budget. That means we've now calculated the elements that we want. We want to group by our month number and summarize by our actual values and our budget values. So I'll come to the end, I'll create a new line, and let's create another name called calc. And calc is going to use our group by function. For the first argument of row fields, we want to use our month numbers. Then we have our values. We have two values, actual and budget. Therefore, we're going to H-stack these values together. The first array will be actual and the second array will be budget. The next argument is the function. We want to sum these values. Then we can skip over the next few arguments. We don't need to worry about field headers or total depth or sort order, but we are interested in filter array because we want to return our profit or loss numbers in this example. Therefore, we only want to return the numbers where, using our table called FinData, the account code, where that is less than or equal to 500. In our general ledger structure, the numbers which are less than 500 relate to our profit and loss accounts, and the numbers over 500 relate to our balance sheet. I'll now close the bracket, enter a comma, and create a new line. Let's return this as our output. I will return our calc. I'll close the bracket and calculate. As you can see, we have our month number, we have our actuals to the end of October, and we also have our budget values. Now let's add our variance calculation. We're going to edit our formula once more, and we're going to create another name called var for variance. This is going to use the numbers from column 2 minus the numbers from column 3. So let's use choose cols, opening bracket. The array is going to be our calc. That is the result of our group by, and we want column 2. And from that, we want to minus the choose cols of opening bracket. For our array, we want the result of our group by, which was in our calc name, and we want column 3. I'll then close that choose cols. I'll then create a new line. We want one more name, which is result, and this is going to be the H-stack of our calc and our var. So that will give us the result of our group by and then our variance calculation. Finally, let's return our result. I'll close the brackets at the end. I'll calculate, and now we have our month, our actual, our budget, and our variance. We have spent quite a bit of time setting up this example. Now let's see what happens if we get new data. We've got our general ledger to the end of November. So let's rename our previous file to _archive. And let's rename our November file to general ledger. So it has exactly the same file name as before. That means we've now switched out our inputs from the October file to the November file. I'll then come back to Excel, and all we have to do to update for this new data is go to the data ribbon and click refresh all. And that's it, everything is now up to date. Power Query connected to the new file, it extracted the data, it performed the same cleaning and transformation actions, it combined it with the budget file and loaded all of that into a table. The table then expands for the new data and our formulas recalculate. So what did we have to do to achieve this? All we had to do was ensure the input was in the right place and then click Data Refresh All. We didn't have to copy and paste anything into the workbook. We didn't have to perform any manual transformations. This was all handled automatically by Power Query, tables, and dynamic array formulas. In the previous section, we loaded the data into a table. Now that's fine, provided we don't have hundreds of thousands of rows, because if we do, Excel will struggle to process that volume of data. But the good news is there is an alternative, and that is to use Power Pivot's data model, which can handle up to 2 billion rows of data. So now let's head back into Excel and see how we can work with Power Pivot to handle large volumes of data. For this example, I have added 2 new queries. One for the chart of accounts, which tells us what our account codes are, what the names are, and also whether they are balance sheet or profit and loss accounts. We also have a calendar table, which includes all of the dates which our data covers, and from that we have the month number and the year number. And these 2 additional queries are currently loaded as connection only. We're going to load our general ledger and our budget as 2 separate tables. We will also load our chart of accounts and our calendar. To load these into the data model, I'll right-click on the general ledger, go to Load To, and at the bottom we have Add This to the data model. I will select that option and then click OK. You will notice that our general ledger now indicates that 2,764 rows have been loaded, but they are not loaded to the workbook, they are loaded into the data model. Let's do the same for the budget. I'll right-click, Load To. We want to add this to the data model, and then I'll click OK. We also need to do the same for our chart of accounts and also to our calendar. We have loaded those as separate tables. We can now create relationships between those tables. To do that, from the Data tab, in the Data Tools section, I'm going to click on Data Model. And then in there, I want to select Manage Data Model. Now, because I don't currently have Power Pivot enabled, it brings up a dialog box in which I just need to click Enable. That will now load Power Pivot and also will show us the data contained in each of our tables. We have our general ledger, our budget, the chart of accounts, and the calendar table. Let's now head to the diagram view. This is where we can create relationships between our tables. I'm just going to move my general ledger table to the bottom, and I'll expand that to show all the fields. I'll do the same with the budget. We can now create relationships between our tables. So from our general ledger, we have our account code. We also have an account code in our chart of accounts. That now creates a relationship between those tables. That means that if we filter on our chart of accounts, it will also filter our general ledger. We can do the same thing for our budget. I'll select on account code and drag that up into our chart of accounts. And once again, we now get a relationship. Let's do the same with our calendar. We have our date, which we connect into our calendar, and we also have our date in our budget, which we also connect to our calendar. Now, anytime we filter the chart of accounts or the calendar, it will filter both the general ledger and the budget. I'll now click on the cross to close Power Pivot. We now have a Power Pivot ribbon, so I will select that. We want to create measures. Measures are like formulas that work inside Power Pivot. I'll select that and go to New Measure. The first measure that we want to create is going to be called Actual. And that is going to be the sum using our GL table, and then we want to sum our value column. I'll then close the bracket at the end. We want to return this as a number, we want to use a 1000 separator, and we want 0 decimal places. I'll then click OK. That has now created a measure for our actuals. Let's create another measure for our budget. Go to Measures, New Measure. We're going to call our measure Budget, and this is going to be the sum of our budget table, and we want the value column. Again, we want a number with a 1000 separator and 0 decimal places. I'll click OK. Now we just want to create one more measure. So we'll go to Measures, New Measure, and this one is going to be called Variance. The variance is going to be the actual, which is the value previously calculated, minus our budget, which is also the value we previously calculated. For this, we want numbers with 1,000 separators and 0 decimal places. Currently, we don't have any visuals to display our calculations. So let's add these in a pivot table. I'm going to select cell B5, then go to Insert. In the pivot table drop-down, we can see From Data Model. I'll select that. We want this on the existing worksheet in cell B5. I'll then click OK. That now creates our pivot table area, and then on the right we can see the fields that we have available and the field wells where we can place those fields. I'm going to start with my calendar, and I'm going to drag the month number down into the rows. Then I will select my GL, and we want to drag the actuals into the values section. Now at present, the actual column shows zeros, and that's because we are working with general ledger data, which when we have debits and credits will always balance to 0. So we're going to go to our chart of accounts, expand that, and in our account type, we're going to drag that into our filters area. And let's now filter that to display only the items in the profit and loss account. I'll select that and click OK. We now get our values. We're now ready to add our budget measure and also our variance measure. You'll notice that our values are currently flipped. So let's edit our actual. I'll right click, go to edit measure, and we want to add minus before our sum, and let's do the same for our budget. Right click, edit, minus, OK, and now our calculations are displaying the correct values. Our data currently goes to the end of November. Let's suggest we get some new data to the end of December. As before, we're going to rename our previous file. We're going to call this underscore archive2, and then for our December file, we will call this general ledger, so it has exactly the same name as before. Then we can come back to Excel. We can go to data. We're going to click refresh all. Everything updates. Once again, Power Query connects to the new file. It extracts the data. It performs the same cleaning and transformation actions. Then it loads each data source into the Power Pivot data model. From there, the pivot tables update, and the data just flows from our inputs to our outputs. All we had to do was ensure the input was in the right place and click Data Refresh All. No copying, no pasting, no manual transformations. And because we're creating relationships, we can create a pivot table from multiple tables. We didn't need endless lookup functions to combine tables together. The relationships did that for us. And we're not restricted by the standard pivot table calculations. We can write measures to perform any calculation we wish. Now, you might be thinking, but I don't want to present my numbers as a pivot table. So we're going to select our pivot table. I'll press Ctrl+C to copy, and we're going to paste a new version of that pivot table. We will then select a cell in that pivot table and come up to Pivot Table Analyze. In the OLAP Tool section, we can click Convert to Formulas. It then asks us if we want to convert our report filters. This is the section at the top. I will check that and then click Convert, and now all of these values are formulas. These formulas aren't based on the pivot table. If we select our pivot table, right click, and then go to Delete Pivot Table, you can see that our formulas still calculate correctly. And that's because they are connected to the data model and not the pivot table on the face of the worksheet. That means we have complete flexibility to place these numbers wherever we wish. So that is my recommendation about where you should spend your time this year. The key element is Power Query. It connects to the data, it cleans, it transforms, and it loads the results into either a table or the Power Pivot data model. Then to update is exceptionally fast. We just make sure the inputs are in the right place, and then we click Data Refresh All. Now, if you want to know more about any of the methods we've covered in this video, then you should check out our Excel Academy. That's the place where we teach you everything you need to know to save huge amounts of time with Excel, so you can spend less time working late and more time doing what you love. just head on over to exceloffthegrid.com to find out more. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.